It was supposed to be a night of harmony, a celebration of light. The royal family gathered beneath the soaring arches of Westminster Abbey, voices rising with the carols, cameras flashing with festive reverence. But something was off, something subtle, until it became impossible to ignore. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Princess Anne wasn't there. Not at the entrance. Not in the pews. Not even mentioned in the official program. And for the first time in over a decade, Kate Middleton, stoic, composed, usually silent on family matters, broke from the script. With millions watching, she stepped to the microphone, smiled, and slipped in one chilling line. For those who are with us in spirit tonight, we carry you in our hearts. The room fell quiet. The seat beside her remained empty. What happened to Princess Anne? Was it illness, exile, or something far more serious? In the next hour, we'll uncover the timeline no one else will show you, the off-the-record whispers from inside the hospital, and the moment Kate made a decision that could shift the entire royal power structure. Because when a royal vanishes from the spotlight, sometimes it's not by choice. And what came next? No one saw it coming. How does a royal just disappear? Not retire, not step back, not even fade quietly into the background, but vanish, silently, suddenly. And during Christmas, no less, a time when every senior royal is expected to be seen, smiling, and very much accounted for. That's exactly what happened with Princess Anne. No press release, no official explanation, not even a throwaway excuse, just absence. And for a woman like Anne, the most dutiful of them all, the one who once outworked her brothers, nieces, and nephews combined, her disappearance was more than strange. It was chilling. The Westminster Abbey carol service was meant to be a high point, Kate's signature event, a symbol of warmth, tradition, and continuity. The royal family shows up. They sit together. They nod along to the hymns. Cameras click. Everything is controlled. So when Anne didn't appear, speculation erupted. Was she late? Was she ill? Was she snubbing the event? But as the minutes passed, and no word came, it became clear she wasn't just late. She wasn't coming. And that's when it got strange. Because the palace didn't address it. At all. No scheduling conflict. No feeling under the weather. Nothing. Even the royal rota, the inner circle of reporters who are usually tipped off ahead of time, was left in the dark. Several tweeted live from the Abbey, clearly confused. One veteran correspondent even posted, "We're told the Princess Royal was expected. Now her name's been quietly removed from the list." No explanation. Another deleted their post within 10 minutes. Why? What was happening behind the scenes? Royal aides were stone-faced. Kate smiled her way through the service, but those who watched closely noticed a subtle tension in her expression, a look that said, "I know something I can't say." And it was about to break open. Because less than 12 hours later, a source inside a London hospital leaked a name. Not Princess Anne, but the pseudonym she reportedly used when admitted, just days before the service. And what they saw wasn't just concerning. It was terrifying. What happens when the truth leaks, not through a headline, but through a handwritten note? In the early hours after the Westminster Abbey service, while the press scrambled to explain Anne's absence and royal fans speculated wildly online, a quiet storm was already brewing inside the sterile corridors of St. George's Hospital. A nurse, we'll call her Emma to protect her identity, slipped a folded piece of paper to a colleague in the staff break room. No words, just a glance. A shake of the head, and then she left. The note contained a name. Not Princess Anne, of course, but the alias reportedly used to protect the identity of high-profile patients. A name the hospital had been instructed not to link to the royal family in any system. A name attached to a patient admitted through the back entrance. No flashing lights. No security detail visible from outside. No press vans. But here's the part that raised every red flag. Emma claimed the woman, under this false identity, was brought in on December 19th, 2 full days before the carol service. Already sedated, monitored, cut off from outside communication. And yet, no one in the public was told. Why? Was it a medical emergency? Or was it something more coordinated? Emma's note continued. Scribbled in shaky writing were just a few haunting words. She's conscious, barely speaking, scared. Something's wrong. Now let's pause, because this is not protocol, not for princess and not for any senior royal, and is famously no nonsense. Military-minded. If she had the flu, she'd still show up for an engagement, shake hands, and keep her distance. She once attended an event with a broken toe. She doesn't miss things, and she doesn't hide. So if she was taken to hospital 2 days prior, without public knowledge, under a false name, why didn't the palace say anything? Why didn't they release a standard statement? Why the secrecy? Emma's story was only the beginning. Within 48 hours, 2 more staffers from St. George's reached out to royal reporters anonymously. Each confirmed elements of Emma's account: the hidden admission, the use of back corridors, the presence of plainclothes security, and a small team of specialized physicians on rotation, physicians with a background in neurological care. One nurse claimed and was unresponsive for hours at a time. Another hinted at internal bleeding, and yet the palace still said nothing, not a word. But someone else had visited, and long before the public even knew she was missing. He came in silence. No entourage, no camera crew, no public calendar entry. Only a flicker of headlights in the darkness outside the hospital gate. And that man was her brother, King Charles. Why would the King of England sneak into a hospital without telling his staff? That's the question that set off alarm bells among veteran royal watchers. Because King Charles, who lives by routine, protocol, and public perception, doesn't do anything quietly. His movements are usually cataloged down to the minute. His vehicles are tracked. His public appearances are scripted. And his private ones? Still noted, even when no press is invited. So when a blacked-out Range Rover was spotted pulling into St. George's Hospital after 11 p.m. on December 20th, less than 24 hours before Kate's carol service, it didn't go unnoticed. But here's the thing. It wasn't marked in any royal diary. There was no statement, no staff confirmations, no security detail outside the main entrance. Only a few grainy photos captured by a hospital parking attendant, showing a man with the king's build, tall, suited, unmistakably Charles, stepping through a side entrance accompanied by just one private secretary. And he didn't stay long. 32 minutes, by one insider's count. 32 minutes of silence. No aides entering the room. No visible emotion as he exited, just a furrowed brow and the tightening of his jaw. So what did Charles see? What didn't say? If she said anything at all? And why did he leave with clenched fists? One source claims the king emerged from the room visibly shaken. Another insists he had a private phone call immediately upon exiting, before even getting back in his car. That call, the source said, was to Sandringham. And that's when the timeline gets even murkier. Because we now know something Charles and had been arguing about for weeks before her hospitalization: succession planning. You see, behind closed doors, and had reportedly been resisting a new reshuffle of royal duties that would sideline her permanently. Sources say Charles wanted to slim the monarchy further, reduce public roles, phase out aging royals, and elevate younger faces like William and, crucially, Kate. And pushed back. Hard. She's the workhorse royal, after all. The only one to consistently rack up hundreds of engagements per year without drama, without scandal, without complaint. She didn't want to be erased in favor of public image makeovers and photo op queens. She saw what happened to Harry. She saw how Meghan was used. She saw the machinery at work, and she didn't trust it. That silent hospital visit? It wasn't just concern. It was confrontation. And it wasn't the first. Because just 3 weeks earlier, at Sandringham, there was a dinner. A royal summit. And by the end of that night, and left in tears. What happens when the most loyal royal reaches her breaking point? 3 weeks before the Christmas carol service. 3 weeks before Kate stepped up to the podium and delivered her cryptic tribute. 3 weeks before Princess and vanished from public view, there was a dinner. A family-only gathering at Sandringham. On paper, it was supposed to be a pre-Christmas retreat. A calm before the storm. A way for Charles to meet with his senior royals and align the family calendar, set expectations, and ensure a united front heading into the festive season. But it became anything but calm. Because, Princess Royal, daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, the one who had served the crown without complaint for 5 decades, stood up during dessert and said no. No to the succession reshuffle. No to being quietly moved aside. No to watching the monarchy become an image game. Eyewitnesses later claimed her voice cracked. that her hands trembled, that she used the word erased. According to one leaked account, she looked directly at Charles and said, "You're not our mother. You're not even close." The room froze. Camilla allegedly gasped. William remained silent. And Kate, whose own role in the royal hierarchy was suddenly ballooning, looked down at her plate. What exactly was Anne objecting to? Here's what we know. Charles had drafted a new structure for the next decade, an updated internal order of precedence. Anne's name was moved down. Her travel schedule was reduced. Her ceremonial roles reassigned. Some to Camilla, others, shockingly, to Kate and Sophie. Anne wasn't consulted. She wasn't warned. And when she protested to Charles privately weeks earlier, she received a cold response. So at Sandringham, she made it public. But that wasn't the worst part. Because after Anne left the room, visibly shaken, according to staff, an envelope was delivered to her chamber. Sealed, marked with the royal cipher. Its contents? Unknown. And reportedly held it in her lap for hours. Didn't open it. Didn't speak to anyone. That evening, she skipped breakfast. Skipped the next day's event. And was gone from the estate before noon. No one saw her leave. And when palace staff went to retrieve the envelope later, it was gone. Never logged. Never archived. That letter, according to insiders, wasn't just a formal reprimand. It was a warning. A message that Anne had pushed too far. That her refusal to adapt to the new royal image was no longer just a disagreement. It was a liability. And within a week, she would be indisposed, publicly erased, quietly removed. But Kate knew. Kate saw what happened in that dining room. And 3 weeks later, at Westminster Abbey, she chose not to ignore it. She gave Anne a message. One hidden in plain sight. A message no one was supposed to catch. Except those who knew. What if the Queen-in-Waiting just called out the palace, without ever saying a word? The carol service at Westminster Abbey was meant to be a flawless show of royal unity. The cameras were in place. The choir rehearsed. The guest list was packed with celebrities, dignitaries, and carefully positioned photographers. Everything was set to reinforce one message. The monarchy is fine, strong, intact. But then Kate stepped up to the microphone and cracked the illusion. On the surface, her message was warm and respectful, a tribute to families, resilience, and the power of community. But listen closer, and the subtext was thunderous. She said, "This evening, we cherish those who are with us, and carry in our hearts those who cannot be." It landed like a piano drop, because everyone knew who wasn't there. Princess Anne. And Kate didn't have to name her. That line, unscripted, off teleprompter, and delivered with a pointed pause, wasn't in the draft released to the press ahead of time. It was added late, quietly, and it said everything without saying anything. But that wasn't the only clue. Observers noted something else, something that passed by most viewers unnoticed in the moment. The program, a small, symbolic flourish printed beside the second reading. Psalm 23, for those who walk through the shadow of the valley. The same passage read aloud at Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. Anne's favorite scripture. Coincidence? Or a hidden tribute? And then there was the music. Midway through the ceremony, the choir performed a lesser-known carol, The Angel Gabriel. A haunting melody, filled with tension and mystery. Not a typical crowd pleaser. But it was Anne's childhood favorite, according to a former royal music director. And finally, perhaps the most pointed moment of all, came just after the final candle was lit. Kate looked directly into the camera and mouthed something, slowly, carefully. 3 words. Royal lip readers, and yes, they exist, have since debated it fiercely. But the consensus among several independent sources is this. She warned us. Let that sink in. Kate, at a royal event, on live television, risking her image, her standing, and her future position as queen, to send a message. Why? Why would Kate, so notoriously controlled, so media-savvy, choose that moment? Because she was done playing along. Because she saw what happened to Anne. And because the palace wasn't telling the truth. The question isn't whether it was intentional. It's who else knew. And that question would be answered just days later, when audio captured behind the scenes sent shockwaves through the royal press corps. Because someone forgot to turn off the microphone. What if the most explosive royal leak was caught by accident? Backstage at Westminster Abbey, In the quiet lull after the final carol had faded and the cameras had been redirected to the royal motorcade, something unexpected happened. Something unscripted, uncontrolled, a hot mic. And it didn't catch a choir rehearsal or a tech briefing. It caught a conversation. A raw, whispered exchange between two senior royals, Kate Middleton and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Neither of them knew their lapel microphones were still live. Neither realized a sound technician in the control room had kept the feed rolling for a final audio level check. What they said wasn't meant for the public, but within hours, it had been heard by at least 5 members of the event's broadcast team, and one of them recorded it on their phone. What's in that recording? Only a few seconds have been leaked, and even those have never aired on television. But here's the transcription, as reported by 2 independent insiders. Sophie. She wasn't just ill, was she? Kate. Shaking her head. She tried to warn us. Sophie. And now? Kate. I don't know. I think they're keeping her in. That's all. But those words were enough to spark panic. Within hours, the technician who leaked the audio was fired. Security was reportedly increased at several royal properties, and internal investigations were launched, not into Anne's condition, but into the leak itself. Damage control mode. Why such a harsh reaction? Because the implication was damning. Not only was Anne not missing due to a mild illness, but she may have been deliberately kept away, contained, hidden, and Kate, by her own whispered admission, believed it. This wasn't conspiracy theorists or tabloids. This was a future queen consort confiding in another senior royal. And the fact that Kate said they're keeping her in raises more questions than it answers. Who is they? Why would Anne be kept in? And what exactly did Anne try to warn them about? The palace has refused to comment on the audio, not even to deny it. But multiple broadcast insiders have now confirmed the technician's termination, and royal aides have reportedly instructed all staff attending future events to assume they are always on the record. Too little, too late. Because this moment broke the dam. Now, journalists were digging into Anne's medical history, looking for inconsistencies, and someone found something. Footage of Anne's last public engagement, and what they discovered was far more disturbing than anyone expected. How do you miss a warning sign that was hiding in plain sight? Before the whispered mic moment, before the hospital leak, before the empty seat at Westminster Abbey, there was video, grainy, unremarkable, overlooked. But now, viewed in hindsight, it's unsettling. December 12th, less than 10 days before the carol service. Princess Anne attended a quiet engagement at a veterans center in Kent. It was one of her standard low-key events. No glamour, no photographers jostling for space, no viral clips waiting to happen. The footage shows Anne arriving with her usual efficiency. She smiles politely. She shakes hands. She even cracks a dry joke about the weather. But something's off. Look closer. Her gait is slower than usual. Her right foot drags, just slightly, across the carpet. At one point, she stumbles. She catches herself with a hand on the wall and smiles it off. But it doesn't look like clumsiness. Then, as she sits for a panel discussion, her hands tremble as she adjusts her glasses. Subtly, but continuously, she grips the table to steady herself. And when she begins to speak, her voice is quieter, slurred, even, like she's working harder than usual to pronounce every word. The event lasted only 35 minutes. When it ended, Anne reportedly skipped the planned private lunch and left abruptly. The palace made no comment. But medical experts, shown the footage in private by a concerned BBC journalist, speculated that Anne could have been experiencing the early signs of a neurological episode, possible stroke, transient ischemic attack, or something even rarer, autoimmune-related neuroinflammation. But here's the part that hits hardest. The clip was quietly removed from the royal family's official YouTube channel 2 days later. No explanation. No archived version. Gone. But the internet never forgets. A copy, uploaded by a royal fan account, was dissected by viewers frame by frame. Within hours, hashtags trended. Hashtag where is Anne? Hashtag royal health crisis. Hashtag carols and cover-ups. The pressure mounted. Why hadn't the palace disclosed her condition? Why wasn't being erased from recent records? And then came a whisper from inside a newsroom. A BBC journalist, already digging into the footage, received a tip from someone inside the Royal Communications Office. A simple message. They tried to bury it. But there's more than footage. There's a report. What report? According to the source, and was evaluated immediately after that event in Kent by a specialist, and her condition was far more serious than routine fatigue. But no one was supposed to know that, because someone, somewhere higher up, gave the order to suppress the findings. No briefing, no updates, no statement to the public, and would simply disappear, and the footage of her struggle vanished from the royal narrative. But digital footprints leave scars, and this cover-up? It was just the beginning, because what came next was even more alarming. The royal website, so meticulous, so tightly curated, suddenly started erasing its December schedule. What does it mean when a royal vanishes, not just in person, but from history? You don't have to storm the gates of Buckingham Palace to see the truth. All you have to do is check the website. For years, the royal family's digital calendar has been a point of pride, an archive of public duty. Every handshake, ribbon cutting, charity visit, and military ceremony logged like clockwork. Efficient, transparent, orderly, until it wasn't. Because in the days following Anne's last public appearance in Kent, something invisible began happening online. Her upcoming engagements? Gone. Her December 13th school visit in Sussex? Scrubbed. Her private audience with Commonwealth diplomats on December 15th? Deleted. Even her expected appearance at the Christmas Eve church walk at Sandringham, a tradition older than most marriages, was removed without comment. No cancelled tag. No health update. Not even a polite postponed. Just gone. Digital erasure. At first, people thought it was a glitch. Then, an oversight. But royal historians and digital archivists, yes, they exist, sounded the alarm. Web crawlers that monitor changes to the monarchy's online presence flagged a pattern. And schedule wasn't just being hidden. It was being rewritten. Entire weeks of entries were rolled back. Official photos disappeared from galleries. Mentions of and in seasonal briefings were quietly edited out. Even search functions on the site that previously returned dozens of Anne-related results suddenly returned zero. The message was clear. If she's not seen, she doesn't exist. But why? And more importantly, who ordered it? Because this level of control isn't managed by interns. It's handled at the top, with clearance, with strategy, with intent. We spoke to a former digital media consultant who once worked with the royal household. Her warning? If a royal's name is being erased in real time, there's one of two reasons. Either they've died, and the announcement is being prepared, or something has gone catastrophically wrong behind the scenes. Now pause. Think about that. In a family that runs on image, silence is often louder than truth. But even silence slips sometimes. Because while Anne was being digitally erased, something physical slipped through the cracks. A reporter, young, unknown, working the late-night desk at a third-tier news outlet, received an envelope. No return address. No note. Just a small USB drive. And what was on it was never supposed to see the light of day. Because this wasn't footage. This wasn't gossip. This was documentation. And the first file was labeled simply, and audio log 12/21. What if the most guarded secret in the monarchy spoke for itself? The USB drive wasn't flashy. No markings. No seals. Just a plain metal stick in a standard padded envelope, dropped anonymously into the newsroom mail bin at 1:12 a.m., according to CCTV footage. The recipient? An intern. 23. Recently hired. No royal connections. No security clearance. And yet, within minutes of plugging it in, she knew exactly what she was holding. Because the first sound she heard was Princess Anne's voice. Weak, unsteady, but unmistakable. A file titled, and audio log 12/21 contained just under 3 minutes of a woman speaking slowly, clearly struggling for breath. Medical monitors beep faintly in the background. You can hear the mechanical hush of a ventilator. And, if it truly is her, says this. This will likely be the last thing I record without interference. I am being kept under observation, yes, but not for what they say. I warn Charles. I warn them all. The house is not safe. Not in its current hands. If this is found, tell Kate. She knows what I meant at Sandringham. 3 sentences. Chilling ones. But it wasn't the only file. There were 4 folders on the drive. Audio logs, 3 files total, each dated each progressively harder to listen to as and speech becomes more labored. Medical summaries, PDF stamped with St. George's insignia. One labeled Neurological Irregularities, under review. Email snapshots, screenshots of internal palace emails discussing containment, press alignment, and one particularly disturbing line. We can't allow, and to go public with that. Video clip, only 7 seconds long. Blurry, possibly from a hospital hallway. It shows what appears to be a uniformed nurse turning off a wall monitor and closing a door marked Private, Royal Patient. None of this has been officially authenticated. But tech experts who reviewed the drive claim its metadata is consistent with St. George's internal systems. And the voice? Voice recognition specialists say the probability that it's Anne's is over 96%. So let's step back. If all of this is real, why hasn't the palace addressed it? Why didn't the mainstream media report it? Because they almost did. Within 24 hours of receiving the drive, the intern flagged it to her editor. The editor escalated it to the legal team. And just as a primetime special was being planned, complete with voice analysis, expert panels, and redacted transcripts, something eerie happened. The network pulled the story. No explanation, just silence. Producers were reassigned. The editor took emergency leave. And the intern? Gone. Not fired. Not relocated. Just vanished from the newsroom. Her social media accounts deleted within hours. The royal PR machine had kicked in, and what it couldn't erase digitally, it buried in fear. But now, rogue journalists and online investigators are circling the leaked files like vultures, sharing fragments, whispering in codes, using burner accounts and archive pages to keep the story alive. Because one thing is clear, if Anne's words are true, she wasn't just sick, she was contained, and the monarchy wasn't trying to protect her. They were trying to silence her. But behind the walls of the palace, panic had already taken root. Because someone high up knew this wasn't just a health scare. It was a potential royal rebellion, and they were about to launch full-scale damage control. What does a royal cover-up look like when it's spinning out of control? It doesn't start with a scandal. It starts with a smile. In the days following the leak of Princess Anne's alleged audio and medical files, the palace didn't issue a denial. It didn't threaten legal action. It didn't acknowledge the existence of the files at all. Instead, it released photos. Crisp, polished, picture-perfect images of Princess Anne smiling at home, reading a book, sitting beside a window, looking well. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The lighting in the photos? Off. The Christmas decorations in the background didn't match the decor in any known room of Gackham Park, her official residence. And Anne's face? Strangely frozen. Royal watchers and digital forensics experts quickly noticed inconsistencies. Her skin texture didn't match her appearance from just 2 weeks prior. The lighting on her jawline didn't align with the rest of the room. Zoom in, and you'd see blurring artifacts around her right hand. Was it a Photoshop job? Some believed it was worse, a deep fake. But whether edited or staged, one thing was clear, and had still not been seen live. The photos were intended to pacify. Instead, they triggered fury. Hashtags erupted again. Hashtag Free Princess and began trending in over a dozen countries. Royal fan accounts flooded comment sections. Some called it the greatest palace lie since Megxit. Others said this was worse, because Anne wasn't choosing to leave. She was being held. Behind the scenes, sources say royal press officers entered crisis mode. Daily strategy meetings. PR firms on standby. Phone calls to friendly outlets, instructing them to refocus coverage on Kate and the children. Suddenly, puff pieces emerged. Kate's secret to holiday calm. Prince George reads at Christmas Eve service. William's surprise charity visit to a local pub. All perfectly timed. All suspiciously irrelevant. But there was one person who was noticeably absent from these feel-good stories. Kate herself. In the week after the carol service, Kate disappeared from public engagements. No surprise visits. No Christmas strolls. No paparazzi shots. Not even her typical post-holiday message on Instagram. Why? Insiders now believe Kate was pulled back, silenced, reined in. After her cryptic tribute to and during the service, and her off-camera confession captured by the hot mic, she had drawn too much attention to a family secret. And Charles? Reportedly furious. One palace aide was overheard saying, "His Majesty believes Catherine overstepped." that she may have endangered Anne's recovery with her comments. Recovery? Or containment? Because at this point, it was no longer about health. It was about narrative control. And controlling a narrative requires consistency. So when inconsistencies began to pile up, not just in photos, but in dates, appearances, and statements, the palace found itself walking a dangerous tightrope. Then came the tipping point. The Times of London, a newspaper notoriously careful when it comes to royal coverage, accidentally published something no one was supposed to see. A draft obituary for Princess Anne. It stayed up for just 7 minutes. But screenshots were instant, and the damage was done. What happens when the crown prepares for death before it's announced? It was early, still dark in London. A quiet Thursday morning. Journalists were sipping their first coffee, inboxes flooded with holiday fluff pieces and embargoed royal press kits. And then it hit. The headline, live on the Times of London website for a full 7 minutes, read, HRH the Princess Royal, Defender of Duty, dies at 73. No warning, no preamble, no official palace statement, just a stark, somber headline, a photo, a quote from King Charles. And then, suddenly, it was gone, deleted, erased, but not forgotten, because by then, thousands had seen it. Hundreds had already screenshot it. A few quick-thinking readers even managed to download the full-page cache before the link broke. And what that page revealed wasn't just an obituary. It was a roadmap. The draft included details that hadn't yet been released. A proposed timeline of mourning. A pre-written tribute from Charles referencing Anne's unwavering service to Queen and country. A note about her final months being marked by private reflection and resilience. A quote from William. Even a tentative funeral date. Now ask yourself, who drafts something like that? Unless they know what's coming. Here's what we learned. Royal obituaries for senior family members are written years in advance. But they're only updated or queued when something imminent is expected. Multiple former royal correspondents confirmed this. If the Times obituary team was told to warm the engine, someone inside was planning an announcement. But then, why the silence now? Why wasn't the obituary followed by a formal death notice? The answer is even more disturbing. Because according to internal leaks from the Times, that obituary wasn't scheduled to publish. It was accidentally triggered during a CMS update by an anonymous user account, an account that no one could trace. Was it sabotage, a warning, or a desperate attempt from within the system to force the truth into daylight? The Times immediately issued a standard correction. Earlier today, a pre-prepared obituary for HRH Princess and was published in error. The Princess Royal remains alive. We apologize for the confusion, but they didn't deny it was real. They didn't deny they had it ready. And perhaps most damning of all, they didn't say who ordered it. Meanwhile, panic inside the palace hit a fever pitch. Royal spokespeople stopped returning calls. Scheduled appearances were canceled. Key journalists who'd previously been fed exclusive access were told to stand down until January. But amidst the chaos, one small but telling move slipped through the noise. A single visitor's name appeared in the chapel register at St. George's Hospital. The Queen's private chaplain. What was he doing there? Administering prayers? Delivering a message? Or giving something far more serious? Because when royal clergy visit the hospital unannounced, it usually means one thing. Last rites. Why would the Queen's private chaplain visit a hospital room if nothing was wrong? The moment that name appeared in the register, everything changed. The royal chaplain, a man sworn to spiritual discretion, rarely photographed, never quoted, was seen entering St. George's Hospital through a rear service door. No escort, no press, no statement, and most curiously, no record of the visit appearing on the Chapel Royal's schedule. In fact, even palace staff weren't notified. Which begs the question, who summoned him? This wasn't a standard pastoral check-in. The Queen's chaplain doesn't make casual hospital rounds. He's summoned only when a senior royal requests spiritual guidance, confession, or, at worst, final prayers. And given that Princess Anne had not been seen, photographed, or heard from in over 10 days, panic began to mount. Here's what a hospital worker later told a freelance reporter. He was somber, quiet. He didn't speak to anyone, just went in, stayed about 20 minutes. When he left, his eyes were red. Red, not from allergies, but from tears. But here's the kicker. The chaplain wasn't carrying his usual briefcase. He was carrying a sealed envelope. Sources close to the chapel royal later confirmed that and had requested a final witness. That phrase means something specific in royal tradition. The verbal documentation of wishes not committed to legal will or official record. Think of it as a spiritual memo. A legacy, a warning, or even a confession delivered through faith rather than court. According to Whispers, and had asked for this process to be done in private. No family, no aides, no doctors, just her and her chaplain. What did she say? No one knows for sure. But the letter he left with, carried in a plain folder, marked only with Anne's initials, never reached Buckingham Palace. Why? Because it was sent elsewhere, to someone entrusted, someone she knew would never bury her voice, someone who had already tried to break the silence. Kate. And that's where things take a turn. Because Lambeth Palace, home to the Archbishop of Canterbury, maintains records of every official chapel witness statement. But when an investigative journalist filed a routine inquiry into royal chapel visits for December, Anne's record was missing. No timestamp, no signature, no log of entry or departure. Erased. Deliberately. A Lambeth staffer, speaking off the record, said bluntly. Either the visit never happened, or someone very powerful didn't want it to count. So what wasn't trying to get out? A truth? A confession? A final act of resistance? And most importantly, did Kate receive the letter? Because less than 24 hours after the chaplain's visit, Kate vanished from public view. No explanations, no photos, no leaks, just silence. And in the days that followed, sources say she refused 3 separate requests from the palace to make a statement clarifying Anne's condition. Instead, she stayed home, surrounded only by her children, and a single, unmarked envelope that had been delivered by hand. What do you do when telling the truth could cost you the crown? For days after the carol service, Kate Middleton was silent, not just publicly, but internally. According to insiders, she pulled back from family WhatsApp groups, ignored calls from senior palace aides, and even declined to attend a private royal lunch hosted by Queen Camilla. Unprecedented behavior, especially from Kate, who has built her entire image on being dutiful, diplomatic, and, above all, strategically silent. So why now? Why retreat just when the palace needed her most? Because Kate wasn't dealing with a publicity crisis. She was holding something far heavier. According to 2 independent sources, an envelope was hand-delivered to Kensington Palace on the morning of December 23rd, just one day after the Queen's chaplain visited Princess and in the hospital. It bypassed the usual security channels. No courier signature, no tracking record. Delivered by a trusted intermediary, whose name has yet to be revealed. What was inside? We may never know the exact contents. But one of the sources, an aide who allegedly saw Kate's reaction, described the moment with chilling clarity. She opened it, sat down slowly, then just stared. For 10 minutes. No words. Her face went completely still. And when William asked what it said, she told him, "You don't want to know." Was it Anne's final statement? A plea? A warning? Kate reportedly clutched the letter in both hands and walked to her study, where she stayed for hours. No phones, no staff, just her. And the weight of a decision that would define not only her place in the family, but possibly the future of the monarchy itself. Because now, she had 3 options. Do nothing. Destroy the letter. Deny its existence. Protect the crown. Confront Charles. Risk being frozen out, smeared by the press, or worse. Go public. A nuclear option. The kind that only ends one of 2 ways. Exile or vindication. But Kate knew something else. She wasn't just a duchess anymore. She was the mother of a future king. And if Anne's words were true, if the system really was as compromised as the letter implied, what kind of monarchy would George inherit? What kind of crown would he wear? According to insiders, Kate didn't sleep that night. She took meals in her room. She canceled all appearances for the next week, citing unforeseen family obligations. But it was an obligation that kept her up. It was fear, because within the palace, things were shifting again. There were whispers of retaliation, of disciplining those who breached the code of silence. One senior advisor even floated the idea of stripping and of future ceremonial roles, posthumously, if necessary. That was the final straw. Kate told her team she would not support the release of any statement suggesting and was stable, resting, or doing well. When they pushed back, she shut the door and cried, not out of weakness, but out of the sheer emotional weight of knowing she was now alone. Because even William, though sympathetic, refused to take sides. He urged caution, urged silence, urged Kate to think of the bigger picture. But what if the bigger picture was broken? And then, one night, as she sat by the fireplace with her children, Princess Charlotte asked her a question that shattered her. Simple, innocent, and completely devastating. "Mummy, why didn't Annie and come to sing with us?" Sometimes, the most innocent voices reveal the harshest truths. Kate had held it together. The service, the silence, the envelope, the pressure, the sudden pullback from the public eye. Every instinct in her body, trained by years of navigating palace protocols and public scrutiny, told her to remain calm, controlled, contained. But Charlotte's question? That broke her. It was Christmas Eve. The children were in their pajamas, sitting near the fire. George was building a Lego castle. Louis was humming a carol out of tune. And Charlotte, bright, curious, too observant for her age, was flipping through the carol service booklet from the night before. She pointed to the empty seat on the program, the one left blank next to Kate's name. "Why didn't Annie and come to sing with us?" Kate froze. She didn't answer right away. Because how do you explain to a child that her beloved great-aunt might be trapped in a palace-built prison? That the woman who taught her how to curtsy, how to speak confidently, how to carry a riding crop with pride, had been quietly erased? Charlotte pressed again, her small voice firm. "Is she sick? Or did someone make her stay away?" That did it. Kate put down her tea and left the room. According to palace insiders, she locked herself in her bedroom for nearly an hour. Not crying, not raging, just pacing, thinking. And then she made a call. Not to Charles, not to William, not to her private secretary, but to someone completely outside the royal machine, a longtime friend from her university years, now a producer at a global media outlet. And for the first time since her marriage, Kate asked for a favor. We don't know exactly what she said, but the source, who insists on anonymity, confirmed this much. She said, "I need to make sure a truth is preserved, in case something happens to me, in case they change the story." And with that, the friend was sent a packet. Documents, notes, possibly even a scanned copy of the now infamous letter. Kate wasn't planning to leak it. Not yet. She was simply creating a failsafe, a shadow vault, a tether to truth, a way of ensuring that if the palace tried to twist Anne's disappearance into a tidy fairy tale, someone else would know better. But Kate didn't stop there. Because while the monarchy tried to bury Anne with distraction and deflection, Kate began working in silence. She ordered her team to pause all new engagements indefinitely. She stopped posting on official royal channels. She even asked a trusted aide to comb through Anne's past press footage and compile every instance where she voiced criticism, however subtle, of the institution. Not for revenge, but for clarity, for legacy. She was piecing together the version of Anne's story no one else would ever dare to tell. And with each clip, each quote, each photo where Anne looked just a little more strained, a little more isolated, Kate began to realize something chilling. Anne hadn't just tried to warn them. She had tried to save them. And now, Kate was the only one left with the full picture. But there was still one question haunting her. If Anne really saw what was coming, why didn't she tell William? That question would get its answer in the most unexpected place. Not in a letter, not in a file, but in a royal inheritance document. And buried in it was a name no one expected. Kate's. What if the most loyal royal passed the torch in secret? By now, the royal house was cracking and was still missing from public view. Kate had gone dark. The palace's photo manipulations were backfiring. And Prince William, once the monarchy's steady heir, had retreated into an almost robotic silence. But behind closed doors, a new threat loomed, one that went far deeper than hospital admissions or digital deletions. Because someone had gone digging. It started with a little-known procedural detail. Every senior working royal is required to designate a contingency plan, a sealed document listing their wishes in the event of sudden incapacity or death. It includes everything from patronage transfers and private bequests to classified institutional directives. These contingency declarations, are stored in a royal vault at Sandringham. They're reviewed once a year, quietly, respectfully. But when Anne's condition became critical, her sealed file was opened early, and what it contained changed everything. Multiple sources confirmed that Anne's updated declaration, revised just weeks before her disappearance, included one unprecedented instruction. In the event that I am unable to continue my duties, my recommendations for royal continuity of values shall pass to Catherine, Princess of Wales. That's right. Not Charles. Not Camilla. Not William. Kate. Why? Because Anne saw what others refused to. She knew that Kate, unlike most royals, was still learning, but not yet corrupted. She wasn't born into the system. She married into it, observed it, measured it, and quietly began to reshape it from within. Kate didn't chase the spotlight. She didn't leak. She didn't scheme. But she watched, and knew that if the monarchy was to survive, not just in tabloids, but in truth, it would need someone capable of bridging the old guard and the new. Someone willing to break the rules, just enough to tell the public what they deserve to know. That clause in Anne's document wasn't legal authority, but it was a signal, a message to the institution. I choose her. And the palace? They didn't like that. Within hours of Anne's contingency being read, palace advisors held a stabilization meeting at Clarence House. The objective? Restore full control of the narrative. Push forward with rebranding Camilla as the monarchy's spiritual matriarch. Make William more visible. And contain Kate. She was instructed to resume appearances by New Year's. To smile. To wave. To post a happy 2026 family photo on Instagram. She refused. 3 times. Her exact words, according to one source, not while Anne's voice is being buried. That refusal may have marked a turning point. Because in the weeks since, Kate's isolation has only grown. Senior aides have stopped briefing her directly. Press photos now focus solely on William. Even media coverage of Kate's past work has been quietly deprioritized across royal.uk. But here's the thing they didn't expect. Kate was ready, and had prepared her. Their private conversations at Balmoral, their hushed dinners after engagements, their notes passed in the margins of briefing folders. They weren't just friendly exchanges. They were training, and had given Kate something far more powerful than titles. She'd given her clarity, a map of what the monarchy had become, a blueprint for what it could be, and a warning of what it would become if left unchecked. But that's not all and left behind. Because just days ago, another sealed envelope surfaced, filed under her private legal records, unopened, addressed not to Charles, not to the palace, not even to the Archbishop, but to Kate. And its label? Open upon silence. What's in that letter? We don't know yet, but we're told it's now in Kate's possession. And as 2026 begins, the world waits. Because if Kate opens that letter and chooses to make its contents public, then the monarchy as we know it could shift forever. But as with everything royal, there's always one more twist. Because just when we thought Anne's voice had gone quiet forever, a voice memo, never before heard, suddenly resurfaced. And the person who leaked it wasn't a nurse, wasn't a staffer, wasn't a journalist. It was Anne. She was silenced, hidden, scrubbed from schedules and erased from history books in real time. But Princess Anne had one final card to play. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a press conference or a televised plea. It was a voice memo, 7 minutes long, recorded quietly, on a personal device, not royal property, and leaked anonymously. The voice was unmistakable, slower than usual, but still sharp, still clear, and begins simply. If you're hearing this, they failed to bury me. It's not a resignation. It's a defiance. She doesn't name names. She doesn't expose scandal for scandal's sake. Instead, she tells a story, her story, of decades in service, of watching the crown shift from duty to theater, of watching power move from halls of tradition to rooms of PR strategy. She speaks of Kate, of why she chose her. She still listens. She still thinks for herself. That's rare in this family. She warns of an institution teetering on the edge. Not because of enemies from outside, but because of rot from within. If we forget what service means, we forget who we are. And in her closing words, she says the line that now echoes like prophecy. Let the people remember not who wore the crown, but who told the truth about it. And just like that, the memo ends. No outro, no signature, Just silence. It wasn't meant to start a war, but it has. Royal watchers, insiders, citizens around the world, now asking, where is Princess Anne? Why the vanishing act? Why the cover-up? Why is Kate now absent from view, sidelined when her star was rising? And most of all, what happens next? Because this wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. Princess Anne wasn't the most glamorous royal. She wasn't the loudest. She wasn't the most followed or fashion-forward. But she was the one who saw the cracks before anyone else. She was the one who stood up when no one else dared. And in her silence, she made the loudest statement of all. So where does that leave us? Kate now holds a letter, sealed, powerful, dangerous. The monarchy holds its breath. Charles holds his silence. And William? Still caught between legacy and loyalty. But you? You've heard the story now. You've followed the whispers, the footage, the contradictions, the defiance. So now we ask, what do you believe? Was this just illness? Just coincidence? Or something far more orchestrated? Because as we close this chapter, one thing is certain. Anne's not gone. Not really. Her message lives on. And if Kate decides to speak, the silence will shatter. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it. If you believe Anne's truth matters, spread it. And if you're ready to uncover what the palace still refuses to admit, subscribe. Because the next storm is already brewing. It was supposed to be a night of harmony, a celebration of light. The royal family gathered beneath the soaring arches of Westminster Abbey, voices rising with the carols, cameras flashing with festive reverence. But something was off, something subtle, until it became impossible to ignore. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Princess Anne wasn't there. Not at the entrance. Not in the pews. Not even mentioned in the official program. And for the first time in over a decade, Kate Middleton, stoic, composed, usually silent on family matters, broke from the script. With millions watching, she stepped to the microphone, smiled, and slipped in one chilling line. For those who are with us in spirit tonight, we carry you in our hearts. The room fell quiet. The seat beside her remained empty. What happened to Princess Anne? Was it illness? Exile? Or something far more serious? In the next hour, we'll uncover the timeline no one else will show you, the off-the-record whispers from inside the hospital, and the moment Kate made a decision that could shift the entire royal power structure. Because when a royal vanishes from the spotlight, sometimes it's not by choice. And what came next? No one saw it coming. How does a royal just disappear? Not retire, not step back, not even fade quietly into the background, but vanish, silently, suddenly. And during Christmas, no less, a time when every senior royal is expected to be seen, smiling, and very much accounted for. That's exactly what happened with Princess Anne. No press release, no official explanation, not even a throwaway excuse, just absence. And for a woman like Anne, the most dutiful of them all, the one who once outworked her brothers, nieces, and nephews combined, her disappearance was more than strange. It was chilling. The Westminster Abbey carol service was meant to be a high point, Kate's signature event, a symbol of warmth, tradition, and continuity. The royal family shows up. They sit together. They nod along to the hymns. Cameras click. Everything is controlled. So when Anne didn't appear, speculation erupted. Was she late? Was she ill? Was she snubbing the event? But as the minutes passed, and no word came, it became clear she wasn't just late. She wasn't coming. And that's when it got strange. Because the palace didn't address it. At all. No scheduling conflict. No feeling under the weather. Nothing. Even the royal rota, the inner circle of reporters who are usually tipped off ahead of time, was left in the dark. Several tweeted live from the Abbey, clearly confused. One veteran correspondent even posted, "We're told the Princess Royal was expected. Now her name's been quietly removed from the list." No explanation. Another deleted their post within 10 minutes. Why? What was happening behind the scenes? Royal aides were stone-faced. Kate smiled her way through the service, but those who watched closely noticed a subtle tension in her expression, a look that said, "I know something I can't say." And it was about to break open. Because less than 12 hours later, a source inside a London hospital leaked a name. Not Princess Anne, but the pseudonym she reportedly used when admitted, just days before the service. And what they saw? wasn't just concerning. It was terrifying. What happens when the truth leaks, not through a headline, but through a handwritten note? In the early hours after the Westminster Abbey service, while the press scrambled to explain Anne's absence and royal fans speculated wildly online, a quiet storm was already brewing inside the sterile corridors of St. George's Hospital. A nurse, we'll call her Emma to protect her identity, slipped a folded piece of paper to a colleague in the staff break room. No words, just a glance, a shake of the head, and then she left. The note contained a name. Not Princess Anne, of course, but the alias reportedly used to protect the identity of high-profile patients. A name the hospital had been instructed not to link to the royal family in any system. A name attached to a patient admitted through the back entrance. No flashing lights. No security detail visible from outside. No press vans. But here's the part that raised every red flag. Emma claimed the woman, under this false identity, was brought in on December 19th, 2 full days before the carol service. Already sedated, monitored, cut off from outside communication. And yet, no one in the public was told. Why? Was it a medical emergency? Or was it something more coordinated? Emma's note continued. Scribbled in shaky writing were just a few haunting words. She's conscious, barely speaking, scared. Something's wrong. Now let's pause. Because this is not protocol. Not for Princess Anne. Not for any senior royal. And is famously no nonsense. Military-minded. If she had the flu, she'd still show up for an engagement, shake hands, and keep her distance. She once attended an event with a broken toe. She doesn't miss things. And she doesn't hide. So if she was taken to hospital 2 days prior, without public knowledge, under a false name, why didn't the palace say anything? Why didn't they release a standard statement? Why the secrecy? Emma's story was only the beginning. Within 48 hours, 2 more staffers from St. George's reached out to royal reporters anonymously. Each confirmed elements of Emma's account. The hidden admission, the use of back corridors, the presence of plainclothes security, and a small team of specialized physicians on rotation, physicians with a background in neurological care. One nurse claimed and was unresponsive for hours at a time. Another hinted at internal bleeding. And yet the palace still said nothing, not a word. But someone else had visited, and long before the public even knew she was missing. He came in silence. No entourage, no camera crew, no public calendar entry. Only a flicker of headlights in the darkness outside the hospital gate. And that man was her brother, King Charles. Why would the King of England sneak into a hospital without telling his staff? That's the question that set off alarm bells among veteran royal watchers. Because King Charles, who lives by routine, protocol, and public perception, doesn't do anything quietly. His movements are usually cataloged down to the minute. His vehicles are tracked. His public appearances are scripted. And his private ones? Still noted, even when no press is invited. So when a blacked-out Range Rover was spotted pulling into St. George's Hospital after 11 p.m. on December 20th, less than 24 hours before Kate's carol service, it didn't go unnoticed. But here's the thing. It wasn't marked in any royal diary. There was no statement, no staff confirmations, no security detail outside the main entrance. Only a few grainy photos captured by a hospital parking attendant, showing a man with the king's build, tall, suited, unmistakably Charles, stepping through a side entrance accompanied by just one private secretary. And he didn't stay long. 32 minutes, by one insider's count. 32 minutes of silence. No aides entering the room. No visible emotion as he exited. Just a furrowed brow and the tightening of his jaw. So what did Charles see? What didn't say? If she said anything at all? And why did he leave with clenched fists? One source claims the king emerged from the room visibly shaken. Another insists he had a private phone call immediately upon exiting, before even getting back in his car. That call, the source said, was to Sandringham. And that's when the timeline gets even murkier. Because we now know something Charles and had been arguing about for weeks before her hospitalization. Succession planning. You see, behind closed doors, and had reportedly been resisting a new reshuffle of royal duties that would sideline her permanently. Sources say Charles wanted to slim the monarchy further, reduce public roles, phase out aging royals, and elevate younger faces like William and, crucially, Kate. And pushed back. Hard. She's the workhorse royal, after all. The only one to consistently rack up hundreds of engagements per year without drama, without scandal, without complaint. She didn't want to be erased in favor of public image makeovers and photo op queens. She saw what happened to Harry. She saw how Meghan was used. She saw the machinery at work, and she didn't trust it. That silent